listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you, and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Today's episode is dominated by the major developing news this afternoon, with speculation rife the Prime Minister will call the federal election tomorrow. That's because of an embarrassing blunder earlier today from the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, who posted on social media the government was in caretaker mode, which means an election announcement is imminent. The department quickly deleted the post and has since apologised. But the timing of this major mistake is really interesting. Just hours before the opposition leader is to give his budget reply speech tonight, with some experts asking if this was a genuine mistake or possibly a clever strategic move to steal Peter Dutton's thunder. Joining us to unpack the latest twist in one of the closest election races in Australian history is Business Editor with 7 News, Amelia Brace. Amelia, thanks for joining us. Tell us exactly what unfolded this morning, our time, with the federal government.
Well, it was the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet which apparently mistakenly posted a tweet saying that the government is now operating in accordance with caretaker conventions pending the outcome of the 2025 federal election. Caretaker conventions, or caretaker mode as we more commonly call it, is basically the campaign period. So once an election is called, right up until the election and the government is reinstated or a new government is voted in, is the caretaker period. And it basically means Parliament doesn't sit and make decisions. The bills still get paid in terms of supply and paying the public service, but basically the other acts of government don't happen. So that is a message that goes out once an election is called, but an election has not been called, Tash.
So one may say the timing of this accidental leak is very interesting because it's taken the thunder away and all the focus from Peter Dutton, who is set to give his budget reply tonight, correct?
Absolutely. So if this was intentional, which of course all parties are denying, it's quite genius, to be honest. It's been incredibly effective in completely stealing the spotlight from what was actually a pretty good announcement in terms of political value this morning from the opposition, the move on fuel excise. We're not talking about it anymore, and it's early afternoon when we're recording this, so it has been a very effective exercise in stealing the limelight.
So let's quickly unpack Mr Dutton's, he leaked the announcement, didn't he? Because it was supposed to be all part of his budget reply tonight, in the concept of one of the takeaways is the cut in the fuel excise. Do you think this is a big cost of living tick of approval for the opposition in the lead up to the election?
It depends. This will target the outer suburbs of our cities and potentially regional voters. So regional voters, not to generalise, you would assume may be leaning towards voting for the coalition, particularly the Nationals anyway. Those outer urban seats, though, that is what's known as the mortgage belt, that is in play. That is something that the coalition needs to target and win if they are to win government. It almost signifies that they're all but abandoning hopes of winning back those teal seats that they lost at the last election, because many of those people, lucky for them, don't have as many cost of living concerns. They don't drive as far. Many have electric vehicles. So this is something that's not really targeted at them. So it gives us an idea of what the coalition is playing at, I suppose, who they are targeting ahead of this election. It's interesting in that it comes obviously just days after the budget, when they were very critical of the government tax cuts, those surprise tax cuts that will equate to about $5 a week for most Australians. This fuel excise, the reduction in the fuel excise, will be about $14 a week. So it is more, but it's not for everyone like the tax cuts. It's for people who drive a lot, basically, and anyone who has environmental concerns would not be in favour of it at all, because it obviously doesn't encourage people to move to electric cars and renewables.
So, Amelia, both the government and opposition, there's been a lot of critics saying they're just buying votes here. It's all about buying votes in the lead up to the election, not about instrumental, fundamental, much needed policy and structural change to ensure that we do see our electricity prices do come down, to fix the housing market, and also to see, the duopoly, some may argue, which has seen supermarket prices increase. Do you think this is just a cheap grab for votes from both the government and opposition?
It is, and it's very cheap indeed in that it's not much money that they're throwing at us in terms of the impact to our hip pocket, but it does cost the budget a lot, billions and billions of dollars, when we've just ticked over $1 trillion of debt and we have a decade of deficits ahead of us. In saying that, we obviously, as I just said, we don't have a lot of money to spend. No Prime Minister, no Treasurer or their opponents in their right mind would be proposing huge reform at the moment. We saw probably the last person to do that was Bill Shorten when he was in opposition ahead of that election, the miracle election that Scott Morrison won, when they did propose big tax changes, bold tax changes, conversations that our country needs to have. They were rejected for it in quite a cruel way. So I think both sides are a bit scarred from that. They're not willing to have these big conversations about things like bracket creep, which is probably one of the things that, while we don't necessarily notice it day to day, it's probably what's having the biggest impact on Australians at the moment, particularly young Australians who are, I guess, moving up the ladder a bit faster because of where they are in their careers, and therefore they're tipping into those new tax brackets. No one's talking about doing anything about that, even though that is the one thing that would help.
Absolutely. So do you think this will be a vote changer for people? We've seen, as you mentioned, the cost of living relief. That's what the government's saying with the $5 tax cut, which actually doesn't come into effect till next year. Then the opposition's come out saying, we'll help you pay for petrol. It will be cheaper by cutting the fuel excise. Do you think that will sway votes?
Well, history suggests the fuel excise will not, because the last election, it was a coalition policy. It was not a Labor policy, and Labor won. Obviously, other factors in play, but based on that one snapshot, it's not a vote changer. In terms of the tax cut, it's honestly very hard to know. I spoke to a few real people, as we call them in TV land, yesterday to work out what they thought. One man I spoke to said, it's rubbish. It's not going to make any difference to my life. What's $5 going to do? But I'm still going to vote Labor. And another man said, I'll take anything I can get. Every little helps. This is great, but I'll still vote Liberal. So based on that, who knows?
Now, talking about who knows, we know that this is a leak with the fuel excise, the cut in it for Mr Dutton's budget reply tonight. There could be more interesting announcements to come out tonight. That's still a mystery at this stage, but what we are heading towards is the Prime Minister possibly calling an election tomorrow morning. Take us through what tomorrow will look like if the Prime Minister does actually call an election.
Well, it is unorthodox to do it on a Friday. We usually see this happen on a Sunday, but there's no reason it can't happen on a Friday. Basically, everyone in the media, all of us will know ahead of time, and we will be positioned along that long, beautiful, leafy drive from the Lodge to Yarralumla, where he will speak to the Governor-General and ask for both houses of Parliament to be dissolved and effectively for the writs to be written for an election. And then it's on. I've covered elections in the past. It's quite amazing how fast you get going. I remember one, we were basically in military jets because they hadn't arranged the commercial planes as yet, and we're all just, lumped in the back, and it's off, and you don't know where you're going. You don't know how long for. It's quite an adventure. As a journalist, it's extraordinary to cover, and I think this will be a really, really interesting election because it will come down to the line. It will almost certainly or very likely be a minority government. So every day, every minute's going to be really important, and it could all start tomorrow. If anything, it has already started, but officially tomorrow.
So what will the date be then, Amelia, if the Prime Minister does visit the Governor-General tomorrow morning?
It is his decision. The norm is a 5-week campaign. We've seen longer campaigns. If you recall, Malcolm Turnbull made the mistake of having a very, very long campaign in the middle of winter a few years ago, which the press gallery did not appreciate, and apparently the Australian people did not appreciate either.
Yes.
No. We do expect it would be the 3rd of May, but it could be the 10th or the 17th. But if he goes tomorrow, we're expecting the 3rd of May.
The 3rd of May. Amelia, really appreciate your time this afternoon and for your great analysis as always.
Wonderful. Thanks, Tash.
That was Amelia Brace from 7 News. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'd love you to subscribe or follow us so you don't miss our episodes or our deep dive of the day. You can also follow us on our socials, on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast, and also on TikTok and YouTube. You just need to search Listener Newsroom. That is spelt LISTNR. And we'll be back in your feed tomorrow morning from 6 a.m. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company. See you tomorrow.